We need to talk about the Supreme Court of the United States, and we need to talk about Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, and more. This, of course, is Daily Persuasion. I'm Joshua Lisec, the New York Times bestselling author and co-author, ghostwriter of 99 nonfiction books now, and a certified hypnotist. Through this unique lens of experiences, I teach you how to better influence the VIPs of your life and your career. You might be familiar with Abraham Lincoln and President Andrew Jackson, both presidents obviously, Republican and Democrat respectively, who enforced their policy decision despite disagreement from the judiciary and the extremely questionable nature of the legality and constitutionality of what they did. Abraham Lincoln, of course, during the American Civil War, suspended the right of habeas corpus. And you might be familiar with the Cherokee Trail of Tears, which a very dark period in history. And of course, we know that contemporaries like Davy Crockett disagreed with President Andrew Jackson on the matter, but he completely and totally ignored Worcester versus Georgia, that Supreme Court decision. You might recall his response, which was, paraphrasing, "The Supreme Court has made their decision, let them enforce it." And as the chief executive of the United States, the commander-in-chief, President Donald J. Trump has the authority to enact his vision and that which is within his purview as commander-in-chief. And if there are enemy combatants, and the drug cartels being terrorist organizations, has the right to get them out, to deport them, especially if they're already illegal immigrants. So this is the conversation that's happening right now in the United States, that the commander-in-chief doesn't have the right to deport illegal immigrants who are members of, well, frankly, terrorist organizations, these various drug cartels. There was a 7-2 Supreme Court decision the other day on this matter that went against Donald J. Trump and the administration. And I want to think about how unconstitutional, perhaps how illegal it is that the Supreme Court made this decision. Yes, you heard me correct. It also shows how botched the frame of the conversation is. So if you are an illegal immigrant, you've already committed a federal crime and you are due to be deported. And if you're due to be deported, it doesn't matter whether you're part of a gang or not. That doesn't matter. But it has been made to matter. You can't deport an illegal immigrant who's a member of one of these, frankly, terrorist organizations because it's not fair or something. It doesn't really make any sense. My humble opinion is for Donald J. Trump to do what must be done, following in the footsteps of Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln. Now, with Jackson and Lincoln, it can be argued that their, let's say, bypassing of the judiciary was to the detriment of the nation, Lincoln and Jackson respectively, at least to the detriment of the people who were being affected most during the American Civil War and during the Cherokee Trail of Tears. One can certainly argue that. And that's where the similarities between and among Jackson, Lincoln, and Trump end. Biden was able to, as president, his administration was able to import millions upon millions of illegal immigrants. It was an open borders policy, obviously. The CBP-1 app, as we know, was used to facilitate ease of access of entry into the United States and sort of the anchor baby technique to be able to keep themselves here. And there was no Supreme Court resistance. There was no judicial resistance at any level from any conservative, and of course, definitely not a liberal judge or justice. That to say, what can we take away from the story? What can we take away from Lincoln, Jackson, and now Trump in terms of persuasion, insights, or lessons? Well, the first thing you might notice me doing is I'm not simply saying, here's what the president should do. I'm pointing out what previous presidents have done. So if you can come up with a because, anchor your position in precedent, you can frame what you're doing as legitimate and historically grounded. Whatever it is that you want to do that you might face resistance. Understand that persuasion is, as I teach my son, and now you, persuasion is the process whereby you make it easier for someone to say yes. So it's persuasion isn't always yes or no. Sometimes it's from absolutely not to definitely not to probably not to likely not to maybe not to I'm not sure to actually maybe to unlikely, but yeah, to probably to certainly. Yes. It's that it can be that spectrum. Now, there are situations where you can instantly, permanently, and forever persuasionize someone. Usually it's using hypnotic tips, but for matters that are so close to someone's identity, like the political tribalism of today, we have to be smart, we have to be careful with how we use arguments, and we don't want to entrench someone into absolutely not by using arguments and statements that are closer to convincing someone who is already convinced. And anchoring your argument in precedent as historically legitimate, given what we've seen in the past, it works. Now, we know that this works because we've seen the left do this to the right. The left will say, well, of course we're going to, left-wing judges will say, and justices will always side with separation of church and state because it's precedent. But it was made up in the first place, entirely made up. You will often find far left-wing legal activists, sometimes known as lawyers, arguing for radical left-wing causes because there has been a judge in the past or a justice in the past who has written an opinion or issued a judgment, let's say, that was radically left-wing. And so they can say, look, it's precedent. And half of all conservatives will immediately drop all of their attacks and all of their defenses and say, okay, you got us. You're right. You're right. It is precedent. Okay, my bad. I'm sorry. You can ban Jesus from the classroom permanently and forever. And for example, right? So precedent tends to work, and you can do things that work. You can just do things. Mike Cernovich. The second thing is that what we can all do is appeal to the urgency of the situation. Understand that this is a time-sensitive matter, not just for the country, but for the United States of America under Donald J. Trump. Roughly 18 months left is what President Trump has in his agenda, his administration's agenda. What we're seeing in special elections, we're seeing in primaries, we're seeing in local elections. We just had one here recently. And when I was there in my conservative township, showing up in the middle of the afternoon were the NPR Americans, the Facebook Americans, the sorts of people who believe the news is real and believe the social media memes that are shared by boomers on Facebook, written with Comic Sans font. And the vast majority of these are Democrats, left-wing voters. You could tell from their appearance, their fashion, and all the myriad bumper stickers in the parking lot. The left came out in droves, and there's a particular tax increase issue in Ohio that passed quite easily. We've seen across the country little, let's say, seemingly small elections like school boards flipping, going from majority conservative to all liberal. We're seeing dark red, let's say solidly Republican counties, cities. We're seeing sheriffs and mayors easily, handily win elections, and they're Democrats in a hardcore Republican area. Why? Well, you know why. Donald J. Trump has 18 months left as the commander in chief from the perspective of having a majority in Congress that's willing to do anything of effect on the country. So there's a serious urgency. Now, from the perspective of those you're trying to persuade, I would lean into what is the urgency of the matter with illegal immigrants? Well, we don't want yet another sad story of an illegal immigrant. Well, we had just had one the other day I talked about on the show, right? This 15-year-old illegal immigrant from Colombia, 90-mile-an-houring into this beautiful woman. And we talked about the unhumans filter and how the far left does whatever they can to show unmerited mercy to the oppressed illegal, which is to show cruelty to the victim's family because she's white and she's a citizen. This is what they do every single time. So you got to work urgency in your pitch. So anchor in precedent, anchor in urgency, and finally, what is the story? What is the narrative? To this day, we remember Jackson, paraphrasing, President Jackson, the Supreme Court has made a decision, let them enforce it. That is the narrative around this issue. What's the Supreme Court going to do? Arrest the president? Permanently disable the commander-in-chief from commander-in-chiefing? Absolutely not. That's not going to happen. You've given your opinion. Thank you very much. The deportations of illegal aliens will now continue. Thank you very much for your thoughts. We appreciate your consideration. So what is the narrative that you need to have that completely obliterates the opposition to you? Keep it to one sentence. What the Supreme Court has made the decision, let them enforce it. What that does is it puts the onus on the Supreme Court for enforcing their own decision, but it also reveals there's nothing that they can do to stop what's coming. So when thinking about your situation, is it a negotiation? Is it a marketing campaign? Is it an advertisement? One sentence. What's your version of you can't stop what's coming? What's your version of that? So we have anchor of precedence, we have the anchor of urgency, and we have the anchor of inevitability. And that is the narrative that you want to be putting out there, particularly the inevitability of this. You can't stop what's coming. Can you?